Good. Thank you all for being here, and thank you all of you that are at home watching. Thank you for being here too. So let's start off. We best get going, otherwise I'll never get to bed, will I? Nicola Bully. So, the College of Policing Report, which came out, didn't it? It was November, I believe, wasn't it? All feels like a long time ago now. Gosh, because that's November. We're 4 months on from when that College of Policing report came out. We are now in March. Yeah, we're now in March. And anyway, some things haven't happened yet that were supposed to be happening in the new year, but I'm not talking about that. We're going to listen to this podcast, which was made at the time when the College of Policing report came out. And I thought it's always interesting to get different views, to get a different slant on things. Of course, really, the College of Policing report almost came down to I mean, the police did admit to a lot of things that they did wrong, and then, of course, we went through the whole thing bit by bit, and it was a long report. And if you read it, the whole thing, there's a lot of information in there. But of course, it came down to this ego battle between the police and Peter Faulding, and something mega. They had a mega fallout, didn't they? Which I'm not sure what's going on now, really, with this situation in Leicester with little Ziello. He's not been found yet, despite Super Sona being there. He hasn't been found yet, bless him, and his family is still waiting, for him to be found. I mean, it's awful, isn't it? Because it's like you're waiting for something, but it's not going to be a good result, is it? The plus thing is if you can actually bring his little body back to be buried, or what's left of it, to be honest. And so it's awful, Anyway, so it seems to have there's been a little bit of what's the word? A little bit of a sort of a bridge built between the police and Peter Faulding, because due to this huge outcry that he created, the family wanted him to go there, and the police have allowed him to go there, and I expect there was lots of stringent conditions, etc. But anyway, he's there, and the more hands on deck, the better to find this little boy. But of course, it was when the College of Policing review was released that we realised that was the first time really that we knew the depth of this animosity between the police and between Peter. And of course, that was the day he came out with his sort of stunning revelation on a YouTube channel. And, that was back in November last year. So that's what we're going to listen to. Hi, Mello. Hi, Blank Faces. Hi, Annie. Well, David, the police say there is CCTV of the child falling into the river. I've also heard, I've tried not to comment on this case at all because I think it's a very sensitive subject. This is a child, a 2-year-old child. So it's very difficult to, cast any aspersions. But apparently the police said there is CCTV and they thought it was nothing more than a tragic accident. And another thing I heard was that he was on his dad's shoulders, whether something happened. Do you think his dad tripped up? So apparently there's CCTV, and that's what's decided the police that it was all a tragic accident. And then now, but of course, there's all different people saying all different things about how he actually came to fall in the water. And of course, the father fell in the water as well. Funnily enough, he didn't die of cold water shock within 10 seconds. He managed to get out, but he was unable to find Jello, and he was taken to hospital, but he was fine. And then the search parties started, and they've been searching for him ever since. And I think it's the 3rd week now. So you can see when you see the scene, it's a very complex place to search because the weather conditions were terrible. The river was overflowing. They seem to be like wetlands as well. It's not just the river, it's very swampy, so it's not the sort of thing you can just glide up and down in a boat with a sonar. There's a lot of swampy areas and that, and it could be anywhere. So I think it's a very, very difficult operation and of course, 2-year-old boy's tiny, that's it's just heartbreaking, isn't it? And then, of course, so I've ended up waffling on about this, but this is the reason I haven't done a video about it, because I think it's very sensitive, because it's quite strange, because his mother's been on, updating her profile on Facebook with sort of sexy photos and things. It's like, I mean, the thing is, these days, when I say she's been, I don't want to make it sound like she's been putting 100 pictures up. It was one, so I should clarify that. Just strange thing to do, really, when your son's missing. So of course it's led to a million conspiracy theories, and who knows? Maybe they're true. Like, even some people are starting to question, because I think it's because they haven't found him. So, but it can take a long time in a river to find somebody, and especially a little boy like that. But it's a very strange situation, isn't it? So we're always hoping that, at least he'll be brought back to his family. But it doesn't look very positive otherwise, does it? Also, so I've ended up talking about this before I even start with Nicola Bulley, but also right at the beginning, they were looking for a dog walker. I don't know if they found that dog walker, because it makes, has he been snatched? Has he been found and snatched? I mean, it is, until they find him, poor little mate, it's going to be another mystery, an awful mystery, to be honest. Okay, I just want to make sure I haven't missed anyone coming in. Hi, Aileen. Thank you. Yeah, I've put it up. I had it down earlier, but it was getting on my nerves then, so I've put it up. I know, just must be awful. Yeah, they said they've got CCTV of him actually falling into the water, which is why the police say they're confident it was an accident. So we'll see. Yeah, Ocean, I know. Yeah. Anyway, let's start talking about Nicola now. So I said I wasn't going to talk about little Jello for that. It's very sensitive when it's a child like that, isn't it? To speculate about things, but it is a mystery. But anyway, let's have a look at or listen to this podcast. Now, it's always interesting, I think, to get people's view on it. These podcasts sort of sneak by you, don't they? Because I don't sort of, I don't know, do you subscribe to them? Do they pop up on your feed? I mean, I'm always on Sky News. I get most of my news from Sky News in the first instance anyway. And then I look elsewhere to sort of find out a bit more about it. But I missed this podcast at the time when it came out. So let's have a listen to it.
When she disappeared. On the morning of Friday, the 27th of January this year, she dropped her 2 daughters to school in the village of St. Michael's-on-Wyre, then took her dog, a Springer Spaniel named Willow, for a walk by the river. She emailed her work. She sent a text to a friend arranging a meeting later that week. She joined a work call, but kept her camera and microphone off. At 9:30 that morning, 20 minutes after her last confirmed sighting, a passerby found Nicola's phone on a bench, still connected to the call.
Now, this is still a moot point, isn't it? Was the phone found on the bench, or was it found on the floor next to the bench? These are all these inconsistencies that, people go round and round in circles, and I don't think we'll ever know that timeline thing, and exactly where the phone was, etc. I don't think we're ever going to have a definitive answer to that. But anyway, this is the official thing, what he's saying, the phone was on the bench.
Her Her dog was off its harness, alone by the same stretch of the River Wyre. Nicola was nowhere to be seen, and it would be 3 weeks before her body was discovered a mile downstream. Over the course of those weeks...
So, you know, depending on what you believe, if you believe that Nicola was in that water all the time, it took them 3 weeks to find her in that tiny little river. You know, of course, a lot of people don't believe she was ever there. Or, you know, other people believe she was put into the river later. You know, everyone's got their view on that. And, you know, we just have to respect each other's view on it. But if we take the official line that she was in there and it was 3 weeks before she was found. So, you know, and that is a different river. That's not even a big river or a deep river. And it's, you know, that's what made it all so sort of suspicious, wasn't it? How she even sort of ended up floating down the river, because you could paddle in that river at the, you know, the water levels were not high on that morning. It does get high, but that particular morning they weren't particularly high. But anyway, again, God, we could talk about that all night, couldn't we? And we would probably never all come to an agreement about it.
Speculation as to her fate became ever louder and wilder. From the beginning, Lancashire police believed this to be a missing persons investigation. Others disagreed, particularly on social media, with many so-called influencers descending on the village.
Many so-called, they always have to get digging about social media, don't they? Well, Sky News was there doing the bloody walk around the field, and Sky News that have been reported to Ofcom for the way that they suppose that, you know, the family had a big go at Sky News, didn't they, at the press conference with poor old Peter Lawson and Pauline Stables. But they've always got to get, and I agree, Charlie, I like now Peterson as well. I do like him, but you know, they've always got to get that little digging about social media. It's just always. Oh, and did you hear that Talk TV, of course, is coming off air, and I think GB News is going to follow it down the pan. The thing is, there is a big crisis in mainstream media at the moment. If you could call GB News and Talk TV mainstream media, I don't know that you could really, but I don't know, they're sort of hybrids, aren't they, really? But there's a big crisis with mainstream media, and they take it out on social media
to conduct their own investigations.
So I'm just going to put this out there. This is just my hypothesis.
Only 10 minutes unaccounted for in the...
And you're right, Bridget. Look how they found Abdul Adezi or Abezi or whatever his name is. They found him in the Thames. Found 2 other bodies at the same time. That for some reason they hadn't been looking for them before. But yeah, so they found 3 bodies in the Thames, which is a massive river. And all right, they didn't find Abdul sort of within sort of a day. I think it took a few days, didn't it? But it wasn't that long. So it's very strange that it took them so long to find Nicola, I think.
Mysterious disappearance of the UK dog walker. But as the search continues, I'll keep you guys updated.
Lancashire police put details of Nicola's private life into the public domain in a ham-fisted attempt to wrest back control of the narrative around her disappearance. Today, an independent report criticised the police handling of the case.
One of the decisions, which is arguably the most significant impact on public confidence, was the release of personal information about Nicola's health. But we are in no doubt that releasing this information in the manner the constabulary did was both avoidable and unnecessary.
Yeah, so that was one big thing that came up in the College of Policing review, and to be fair, they did admit themselves. It was dealt with completely wrongly, wasn't it, the way they divulged her personal information. I don't know about you, but I can remember literally in that Nicola Bulley case, I can't remember ever gasping so much of, you know, like every time I put on the news and there was something said about it, I was like, what? You know, it was just one sort of what after another, and you know, just watching it on the news, you know, before I even started looking into it in great detail, just like what, you know. It was just one sort of oh my God after another, wasn't it? And that's why everyone was so sort of obsessed by it or invested in it, because it did feel all wrong. It still feels all wrong. It's just the point that we're at now. I don't know what, where you can go with it. That's the thing. But it still feels wrong to me anyway.
I'm Neil Patterson. Welcome to the Sky News Daily. Our crime correspondent Martin Brunt is outside the venue in Preston where the report was launched. And Martin, I suppose we should state from the outset that the investigation itself was...
Hi, Simon. Hi, Amanda, Jane. So I just want to say, so now he's going to bring Martin Brunt in now. And Martin Brunt is the crime correspondent at Sky News. He's been there for donkey's years. He's a big mate of Peter Faulding and Mark Williams Thomas. They're all mates. They've been like mates, for years, involved in cases and things like that. And Martin Brunt, of course, was the person. He was heavily involved as well with the Madeleine McCann case. He was the guy that went round to the that poor Brenda's house when they exposed her as being a troll on Twitter, and she ended up self-deleting because Sky News Martin Brunt turned up at her house filming her, etc. And she actually deleted herself because of it. So, that's Martin Brunt. He kept a low profile for a while. Now he's still around. He'll be their senior crime correspondent, I suppose, because, he's bobbing on a little bit like we all are. But he's still there. So they're going to bring him in now.
Wasn't criticised.
Yes, there is some praise at the start of the report for the investigation and the way the search
Hi, Essex boys.
was carried out. And that original hypothesis that Nicola had gone into the river and probably drowned was correct. But there's an awful lot of criticism in this report. It really goes downhill from then on. One of the biggest criticisms is after about 2 weeks of the investigation, police decided to release personal information about Nicola. They decided to say in a press release that she had significant...
Now, he just mentioned there that they did, they praised the investigation. Well, they didn't they say they investigated well or something? We know now, don't we, that now the chief constable's gone. Everyone's gone. It was cocked up, and I think my personal opinion was it was cocked up from the top. The chief constable, I don't know why, but just didn't. It was never sort of taken that seriously, was it, from the beginning? It was just assumed, that she'd gone in the river, she'd done something to. I think they thought she'd done something to herself. And then everything from then on was catch up. Now, it's interesting because I've always said that. But later on, when you hear this lady, ex-chief constable, a woman chief constable that I've not heard talking before, she says the same thing. So, that the responsibility rests with the chief constable. Well, of course, he's gone now, or he's going anyway. I think is it the end of March he goes. There'll be a new chief constable, which looks like it's going to be a woman.
Alcohol issues and struggles with the menopause. Now, reporters had asked about any vulnerabilities of Nicola right at the start of this investigation. The police said, no, there's nothing. If they had told us in confidence, reporters, that there was this background, we would have better understood why police were so keen to rule out a crime. And it...
Yeah, and I think that's very important, is it? Because right in the beginning, poor Sally, hapless Sally, was asked specifically, were there any issues that, did Nicola have any issues? And she said specifically, no. So I do think it's right there what he's saying, because the media, the police, is the way they dealt with the media through this whole thing was rubbish, wasn't it, right from the start? And like he's saying, that if they would have, because what normally happens, I think, is like the police will speak to the media and they'll say to them, look, but we don't want this coming out yet, or there's always, but since the Leveson report, there's not the same relationship now as there used to be between the police and the media, and I think it's quite difficult now. Whereas before, that would have probably been what was said, and they would trust the media not to reveal it, and then the media would have understood more why, like he said, that they were not looking for a crime, like from day one. I mean, you don't have to be Inspector Clouseau to know that when a woman just disappears like that and she's walking her dog on her own, there's likely to be some suspicious circumstances. It's definitely possible, if not probable, that something untoward has happened to her, because she could have been snatched, she could have been attacked, she could be lying dead in the woods. But right from day one, they didn't even seem to really explore that possibility. They were straight away focusing on the river, and I did still feel that they thought she'd thrown herself in the river. But they just didn't entertain any other possibility, did they? Right from day one. And that's where they went wrong. And not also like denying that she had any issues and then later saying she had all these issues. It was just a cock up from day one.
It would have informed our coverage, but because they didn't, because some of us picked up on Nicola's background and there was a fear amongst police that somebody was going to report those personal issues, the police jumped in and released them themselves in a very cack-handed way. National College of Policing, in its report, talked about that decision to release that information as avoidable and unnecessary. They're soft words. That sounds like a slap on the wrist. I think it was much more serious than that, and a lot of other people do. There were claims that in releasing that information, the force was being sexist and misogynistic. In a press conference today, the police have denied that, but I think that criticism will reverberate.
I mean, Martin, I remember being in the news.
Well, you know what I think is, I think they definitely were being sexist and misogynistic, because if that would have been a man that had gone missing and he would have had problems with his prostate or, erectile dysfunction, or he was had to take Viagra or something, that definitely would never have been released. So to release Nicola's very private and personal information at a time when she was still missing. So, just the fact that they released it, to me, was like they must have thought she was no longer on this planet, because I just envisaged if she had, for whatever reason, decided to just run away, and she was feeling, and then imagine watching that on the TV. Your person, then they didn't know what had happened to Nicola when they released that information. And they were releasing her personal information. She could have been listening to that. She could have seen that on the front page of the newspaper. It was just foul, actually, to do that. It was horrible. And I'm sure they did it for a reason. People are saying that it's because somebody had threatened to go to the newspapers with the story of it. And it was to sort of steal the thunder away from that, if you like, so that if they released it first, then whoever it was that was saying they was going to sell the story to the newspaper wouldn't be able to do that. And it may be true, but they didn't say that in the College of Policing review.
Newsroom when that information emerged, and I remember us all kind of almost sitting up straight and paying attention, because we're simply not used to information of that nature being released in the manner in which Lancashire Police chose to do it. I mean, so explain how that would have worked.
It had been the practice some years ago for when there was a sensitive investigation and there was information about a missing person or perhaps a murder victim or somebody else who was the subject of a police investigation, a crime. There was information that the police did not want to put out for lots of reasons, perhaps because of it was so sensitive that the family wouldn't want such information to be out in the public arena. But in the past, we've had press conferences where we've been given the basic public appeal for information, and then we've been taken aside and told, look, this is information that we want you to have because it will inform the way you report it. Now, if we'd been given that information about Nicola right at the start, we would not have used it, but it would have informed the way we reported the police investigation. What the police did, what happened was that they created this vacuum of information. So to all intents and purposes, Nicola had vanished into thin air, and it threw up all sorts of conspiracy theories, not least.
So, hi Ali, hi Renee. Yeah, now the police did admit this in the College of Policing report, didn't they? That, yeah, their media relationship with the media was absolute rubbish, wasn't it? And that's how Peter Faulding ended up being on the TV, you know, every 30 seconds, because, you know, he said he was just left to it, but he perhaps should have known a little, but I'm sure he's learned his mistake from that. I honestly, when I look back at that now, because I didn't know that much about Peter Faulding then, I thought he was sort of like, you know, involved with the police and in charge of the investigation or what. You know, that's what came over to people who were watching it, because he was just never off the telly talking about it and giving his opinion that she definitely wasn't in the water, of course, over and over again, which of course now he's saying she was in the water, but he still hasn't had his images verified or shown any evidence whatsoever. I don't think we'll ever see any evidence unless it pops up in years to come in one of his books, you know. And to be honest, I'm at a stage where I wouldn't believe his evidence now, because I know that he's, you know, when he showed it to one of the other YouTubers, they said that he'd enhanced the images. So those images have been, they're not, you know, who knows when you see them if they're the original images or not. So personally as well, I don't think it makes any difference, really. I don't see that it makes any difference. But anyway, Martin, his mate, does mention it in this podcast.
Suggestions that her partner Paul Ansell was in some way responsible for her disappearance. I mean, this is written out in the report today. All of that, we believe, could have been avoided.
And of course, there is an absence of detail when there is merely speculation and very little of it, in fact, informed speculation. Others will fill that space with their own thoughts, and so it proved. I mean, the amount of interest in this story that came from social media. Yep, there were 500 media calls going into the press office, but there were 75,000 social comments.
75,000 social comments. It's a lot, isn't it? I mean, it did go crazy. I think they learned a lot, didn't they, then the Gaynor Lord case, when that lady went into the river. You know, the police there, the Norfolk police did sort of had learnt something from this case. You know, I think generally everyone knows it was very badly handled in lots of different ways. And the media thing was a big thing because, you know, as I've said before, the police, they have to accept that social media is there. You know, can't just, you know, it's like, you know, close your ears, put your hands over your ears and close your eyes, and the social media will go away. It won't. It's there. So what you have to do is learn to use it. And I think we've seen a good examples of that over in America and Australia, and that you can use social media to your advantage. You just, once you let it get out of control, well, there was no going back. But it was their own fault, really.
About what was taking place during this investigation. Did the report say anything about the way in which that aspect of the public response was managed?
Yes, well, if I tell you that some of those TikTok detectives were let in as journalists into the first two press conferences, that gives you an idea.
TikTok, they're obsessed with TikTok. So some of those TikTok detectives were let into the first two press conferences. So obviously it wasn't controlled properly, but, you know.
Of how badly Lancashire police were in their sense of social media and how it was going to impact on the investigation. So the report says that Lancashire police really failed to understand the impact of social media and the effect it could have on their investigation. And all those comments you talk about, 75,000 comments, the impact that all of that has on public confidence in Lancashire Police. And of course, the longer the search for Nicola went on without finding her, the greater that loss of public confidence becomes. But it was also, the report also says that...
Sounds like Martin Brunt's outside somewhere. I'm sure there's lorries going past it. Couldn't they afford to put him in the studio?
That issue around Lancashire Police's failure to understand social media has wider implications for policing, and many other forces are afflicted by the same lack of understanding. And one of the recommendations is that more police forces should get to grips with the impact and the effect of social media and how it can impact on their investigations.
We should also, I suppose, reference Peter Faulding, Specialist Group International, and the effect that they had on this investigation. Mr. Faulding was the leader of this SGI organisation, underwater search experts, that somehow became embroiled in this investigation, and indeed he was speaking to the media directly during this investigation.
Yeah, he was. They did admit that it was their fault that he was allowed to speak to the media directly. And that was definitely an impression that came over, that he had more, that he had more to do with the actual investigation, wasn't it? If you didn't know, like we know now, we can see that now he's helping to look for little Cello. That's, he's been obviously told he's not allowed to say anything to anyone about anything. I bet they made him sign a disclosure or NDA or whatever this time. But to be fair, the College of Policing, they did admit that was their fault. They did admit that.
Both of which I suspect that the independent report has picked up on.
I can tell you exactly how he got embroiled in it, Neil, because I recommended him to the family. I've known Peter for a long time, and I've reported on him in a number of very high...
Hang on, rewind. What? I recommended him to the family. What? Where did that come from?
Faulding was the leader of this SGI organisation, underwater search experts, that somehow became embroiled in this investigation, and indeed he was speaking to the media directly during this investigation, both of which I suspect that the independent report has picked up on.
I can tell you exactly how he got embroiled in it, Neil, because I recommended him to the family. I've known Peter for a long time. And
I recommended him to the family. Hang on, this is something else now again. So we've had, I thought it was Emma, people said Emma rang him, then it was Paul who rang him. Emma said she saw him on the telly the night before. I've seen that interview where Emma said, well, we were watching about Peter. Now, Martin Brunt is saying, I recommended him to the family. Do you know, there's nothing in this case where you hear the same thing from everyone. So what has it got to do with Martin Brunt recommending him to the family? What's Martin Brunt got to do with the family? He's the crime correspondent for Sky News. And remember that, as I say, in the press conference when they were confirming that it was Nicola that they'd found in the river, the family was scathing about Sky News. And now Martin Brunt is saying here that the reason that Peter got involved with SGI is because he recommended him to the family. Oh God, it's like being in a parallel universe, this case. It's like every time you think you've heard it all, there's something else. How did Martin Brunt recommend him to the family? Good God.
And I've reported on him in a number of very high-profile investigations. He has a long and good track record in searching for bodies and other areas of police investigation. When I went up to Lancashire, I mentioned him to a friend of Nicola's family and suggested that he might be of use.
So I mentioned him to a friend of Nicola's family and suggested that he might be. So he's scouting for work for his mate. Sorry, I shouldn't say that because Peter did give his services free. Though, of course, got a lot of publicity for his book and that. But I mean, not they all went wrong then in the end, because then he. I mean, what? I mean, you could. Do you think? I'm just a bit speechless. I'm completely speechless. It's not very often when I'm speechless, but in my, I've always. Emma said that she saw him on. She said in an interview, I saw we were talking about Peter, and they decided to contact him. Anyway, so now Martin Brunt is saying he's the reason that Peter and SGI went down there, that he recommended him because he's known him so long, because they are mates. They're like Bezzy mates. They are with Mark Williams Thomas. He's recommended Peter to a friend of Nicola's family, which I would imagine would be Emma. But who knows? Who knows? And suggested he might be of use. Oh my God! Do you know? I haven't listened to all of this podcast. I'm glad I'm playing this because when I found the podcast, I just sort of listened to it like I was listening to little bits here and there, just to see if it'd be interesting or not. And to be honest, the thing that interested me the most, more than what he's saying here, because I didn't listen to all this, was what the ex-chief constable says at the end, and I just thought, oh, that'd be interesting. But now, I'm glad that I'm listening to every bit now.
And they contacted him, and they were at that point, a week on, very frustrated at the police's lack of success in finding Nicola. So they brought him in, and the police acknowledged that if they'd refused to let him help, they would have perhaps looked as though they were being a bit obstructive, particularly as they hadn't.
Yeah, and this is what's happened with Ciello's case, because I don't want to, but this sort of the SGI and Peter Faulding saying, "Oh well, we can't just go there." So then there's that, like, all these people going straight to his fanboys, like, and girls, going to the family and causing more stress to the family. As if Peter's going to swoop in like some super sonar and pluck their boy out of the river, which of course hasn't happened. There's this sense of undermining the police, really. The police know what they're doing as far as searching is concerned. There are other, they were using other agencies and that. But I agree that the more the merrier, and it's it's good that Peter's gone and helped. His SGI's gone to help, but they still haven't found Ciello. So it just shows you what a difficult thing. It's not because the police were incompetent in not finding him. It's difficult to find him, and this happened with Nicola, didn't it? It was like because from what I believe. In the end, the family, whoever that is, got so sort of determined that they were going to have SGI there, that they threatened to make a negative, commentary, like threatened to make a negative press conference. Probably Martin Brunt would be reporting it on Sky News, saying, "Oh, police refused to allow specialist divers," or something like that. So that's how in the police did get sort of browbeaten into it, a bit like with Ciello. But of course the police, I think, have been, it's awful, isn't it, that they've sort of been vindicated a little bit, that Peter didn't just swoop in and find him in 6 minutes like he claimed that he did with Nicola. It's the police haven't found Ciello because it's difficult to find him. It's not because they're not trying their best or they haven't got the best teams and the best equipment, etc. It's just because of the situation. And this is what happened here. The police were sort of almost blackmailed, really, into having Peter there, because the family said if they didn't get Peter there, they'd make a negative press statement. So then Peter went.
Found Nicola at that stage. So he did get involved, but he was a bit of a loose cannon, and he, in the absence of regular press updates from the...
Yeah, he was a bit of a loose cannon, and he's right. In the absence of regular press updates, he ended up becoming like the press officer, didn't he? But, Peter, he has been doing this for a long time. He probably should have known you know, sorry, I was going to mention something about yoga, then I won't because I'll start giggling again. But he should have known from his previous experience, you know, with the police, etc., in cases. He should have known really not to speak to the media, but he probably felt under pressure too. You know, he said they were all there, always waiting for waiting, you know, for him to speak. And of course, the police weren't fulfilling that role, so. You know, it was just like a perfect storm, really, wasn't it? And of course, he was going off digging and doing things that he wasn't supposed to do. And I mean, it was just a complete fiasco, really, wasn't it? One way or another.
The force itself, he would talk to the media and he'd give his views on the investigation, and some things were accurate and some things were inaccurate. What the report does is not criticise him specifically, but it criticises the way Lancashire Police allowed him to talk freely to the media. And one other thing, I've interviewed Peter since, and he has said in an interview today that he is absolutely insistent that within 6 minutes of starting his search with sonar equipment around the river near the bench,
you know, it's like he had to get that in, didn't he? Now, of course, it was 6 minutes, but it was the second day. So, yes, he's absolutely adamant. But, you know, he's not proven it apart from sending his images to the world, and his dog has seen the images, except anyone who matters.
Where Nicola disappeared, he found or detected her body.
When I see a body, I've been doing this since 1999. I pioneered the use of sonar, so it was very clear to me that this probably was Nicola. The target I found has got laying in a fetal position. It's got a head. It measures precisely 1.61 meters, which is the same length as Nicola, as she is in height. I can see the crossed legs. I can see the arms, see the back, and the bottom around. With all my experience, know what a body looks like.
He told the police dived that spot.
Oh, God. Yeah, but what Martin's not saying here, though, is that Peter insisted she was not in the river. And actually, because people took Peter's word as gospel, including me, that's where a lot of the conspiracy theories sort of broadened, lengthened, got worse, because everyone believed Peter when he said she was categorically not in the river. So he's not mentioning that. But anyway, never mind.
Police say there wasn't a body, it was just tree branches. Now, Peter says, well, they didn't ask for the data that would back up my sonar images. He is absolutely adamant that he found Nicola's body 2 weeks before it eventually did emerge about a mile away further downstream.
Famously, infamously,
yes,
you said that even after finding what you believe was Nicola, you said that she wasn't in the river. Why did you say that?
Because I believe the police. The police actually said to me, "There's nothing there," and
Yeah, he believed the police. You know, we're now over a year on. Anyway, it's no point in going back over all that again. But you know, we've all got our views on that, and I don't think they're going to change.
I did say to the team, "This is odd," you know, straight away. But I had to believe the police. I mean, I was swamped by the media. There was no control with the media. I was sort of, there was no police around, and they never asked me to stop talking to the media, and I didn't enjoy doing it. And they're just doing their job, the media. But
he says he didn't enjoy doing it. I'm sorry, but he did enjoy doing it. He does like talking to the media, because a lot of the interviews, he carried on doing interviews over and over again on the media. Saying she categorically was not in the river. He cast a, you know, he sort of was, he said, anyway, never mind. As I say, it's no point, because everyone's got their view, but there's no evidence, you know, or we haven't seen any evidence yet. And to be honest, as I say, it's all been enhanced now anyway. So how reliable can it be all this time afterwards?
I said that because I believe the police officer diving. We were not allowed to dive the target. I know if that had been us diving, Nicola would have been recovered.
Martin, the problems with this investigation, as identified by the independent report, do you think they would have been there had this incident taken place in London, where the Metropolitan Police were in charge, in Manchester, where GMP would have been in charge?
Most of my experience is dealing with the Metropolitan Police, and much as I jump up and down and rant and rave about what I sometimes think is poor communication from the Met, it's only when I go outside of London and deal with forces like Lancashire, and there are others, when I begin to understand in comparison how good the Press Bureau is at the Metropolitan Police.
Hi Neil, hi Desi. I hope I haven't missed anybody else coming in. I'm sorry if I have. Yeah, so he now goes on Martin Brunt to sort of saying how good the Press Bureau is for the Metropolitan Police as compared to the Lancashire Police. So, you know, well, we know that the Metropolitan Police, they haven't got the best reputation at the moment, but for different reason, maybe their press office is quite good, but they've got a load of bloody RAPISTs and bloody SOs as policemen there, haven't they? They're having a good clear out at the moment after the Sarah Everard sort of fiasco that Wayne Couzens should never have been a policeman in the first place. And although, you know, none of this is ever going to bring Sarah back to her family, but hopefully lessons learned, you know, it's that old phrase, isn't it? So from what Martin's saying, and he would know because he's dealt with cases for years, hasn't he? I suppose he's saying that the Metropolitan Police Press Bureau is much better, and even Manchester Police is better, but the Lancashire Police they're not. So that's better, you know. And I think, you know, we all know that they were pretty crap, weren't they? Really, they did deal with it all pretty rubbish.
Police, I don't believe this would have got out of hand if this had been a Metropolitan Police investigation in the same way that it did with Lancashire Police. For lots of reasons, I think there's a much more grown-up attitude at the Metropolitan Police about dealing with the media, giving us off-camera briefings. It's not perfect, and it's not like it was, but I think things would have been very different. But the upshot is, and let's be positive about this, I think what's emerged...
How did you hear there? He said it's not perfect, but it's not like it was. You know, I think this is what Peter mentioned, wasn't it? He wants to sit down in a room, you know, and all talk about it, like, but he doesn't want a new investigation. He's not interested in anything coming out about Nicola or whatever. He wants them all to sit in a room and talk like they used to. And he's sort of referring to that because since the Leveson inquiry, the relationship with the police has been different. The relationship between the police and the press and all the phone hacking scandals and this, that and the other. And it has changed the relationship between the police and the press. And I don't think that's ever going to go back to as it was. And it probably wasn't really good, you know, to have, you know, it resulted in, you know, the Millie Dowler phone hacking and Piers Morgan and, you know, all the awful things that happened. We don't want those to happen again. But I suppose it's a question, maybe it's gone too much the other way now. They need to find somewhere in the middle that works for the police and works for the media. And that's, I suppose, where, you know, they need to go now.
Now is because of the bad way Lancashire Police handled their media relations, that there's going to be a sea change, or at least there's the impetus for a sea change between journalists and police. That fracture began after the Leveson inquiry, when Lord Leveson ruled that police officers often got too close to journalists. So that led to the draw.
Yeah, so that Lord Leveson decided that police and journalists were too chummy, and they were. But this is what Peter Faulding wants back, isn't it? That's what he wants back. That's what probably Martin Brunt does, and all. Because at the end of the day, not so much Peter, but Martin Brunt, he's a journalist. So he's a reporter. He wants the story, you know, report. That's their job. Their job is to get a good story and get it out there. You know, that is their job. You know, you can't say, oh, what they're supposed to do, just sort of sit in the car and not go out and interview anybody, or what. That is their job, to interview people, to report on things that are in the news, etc. So I don't know. So the answer is the police, maybe, and hopefully they have learned from that. They certainly seem to learn from it as far as the Gaynor Lord case was concerned. And I think the police have been better with the Cielo situation. They've been given updates where there are updates. There just haven't been any, have they, for a couple of days? I suppose they just think, how many times can they go out and just say the same thing? We're still looking, but, you know, and I don't know if SGI are still there or not. I just have no idea. But it's a very difficult situation, isn't it, to give out, you know, the police have got to be distant, you know, they've got to be professional, but they've got to control the narrative. That's what they've got to do, in the sense of what the information that they can give out, they've got to give it out, because they've got to, you know, because at the end of the day, when people, especially in a case like this, I mean, probably a lot of the time, people don't take that much notice of what's going on. But every now and again, you get a case that's like massive like this, and that's when you've really got to step in and take control of it.
Drawbridge went up, the shutters came down, and it became very difficult to talk to police officers or police press officers. They all found an excuse to withdraw from us in a way, which was terrible if you're a crime reporter. But I think at least there's the impetus now for that to change. It's come, ironically, from the National College of Policing, which, as I said, I believe was beginning to treat us journalists as a threat rather than an asset. But maybe the pendulum is going to swing back, not so much in our favour, but in the favour of more open relationships.
Don't you get this feeling that, and I felt it with Peter as well, and with Mark Williams-Thomas, etc. I mean, where's Mark Williams-Thomas going to go when he can't go on Talk TV or GB News or whatever? But there's this real almost a resentment because of the way the police are now, as compared to what it used to be. All the, you know, all boys together, didn't it? All sat in a room, like Peter said, all, you know, smoke-filled rooms and all chums, you know. And it's not now. So these sort of old school type people like Martin Brunt and Mark Williams-Thomas and Peter and that have been around for years and sort of used to a different way of working, they're finding that difficult, and they're going to find it difficult when new blood comes in now, because, you know, in Lancashire Police, they've got rid of all the old ones. When I say old, they're not old really, but, you know, old, you know, all the 50 pluses have gone, and they'll be bringing in some new blood, and it's a different world now. I think it's a different world, and maybe it's never going to go back, unfortunately for Peter and Mark and Martin. It's never going to go back to as it was.
And that can only contribute to this terrible confidence problem, public confidence problem in policing. It's rock bottom. I think it can only improve. And that may be a direct result of this report into the Nicola Bulley investigation.
Martin, thank you. In just a moment, we'll reflect further on those inquiry findings with a former chief constable who herself handled a very high-profile investigation, that of Raoul Moat. Back soon.
Oh, Raoul Moat. So this lady that we're going to listen to in a minute, she dealt with the high-profile investigation into Raoul Moat. And that, of course, you know, that was a difficult case as well to, you know, because it, you know, he was, a lot of people still, you know, thought of him as some sort of hero or whatever. And, you know, oh God, listen, if we start hearing banging tonight, because every time I talk about Raoul Moat, the last time, he was like, oh my God, I swear he was visiting me. So, so we're going to hear this lady talk. She's very interesting, I think.
Back in the summer of 2010, a manhunt took place across...
Oh, by the way, hi, Selena. Did I say hi, Selena? I can't remember.
Tyne and Wear and Northumberland. After killing one person and injuring two others, Raoul Moat went on the run, living wild for almost a week. The local community was terrorised. The world was, for want of a better word, enthralled, glued to the twists and turns of a search that ultimately ended with Moat turning the gun on himself.
Yeah, it was very sad. It just the whole situation was sad, and it resulted in. Anyway, I have done a video about Ralmo. I'll try and remember to link it in the description. I'd forgotten that it was a week that he was on the loose. I mean, a whole week. That's a long time, isn't it? And if you lived in that area and he was sort of on the loose with a gun, and it must have been quite scary. And it was very sad, really, how it all ended, and a very sad situation. But anyway, this lady that's going to talk now, she was in charge of that operation.
The Chief Constable of Northumbria Police during that time was Sue Sim, and she joins me now. Sue, given your experience of high-profile, highly visible investigations, have you got any sympathy for Lancashire Police?
I'm afraid I don't. I must admit, I agree totally with the College of Policing that
So she's just said straight away, Sue Sim, she said straight away she's got no sympathy with Lancashire Police. She agrees totally with the College of Policing.
Investigative work that was undertaken by Lancashire was extremely good. However, had they declared a critical incident, which means in basic terms, if you have an incident that you know full well could have a detrimental impact on either the family.
So I just want to say hello to Wesley and hello to Rachel, who've just come in. Hi.
Is involved, the victim or the community in general, then you should establish what in policing terms we call a gold, silver and bronze strategy. So that means that the whole thing should have been led by a chief officer who would have then allowed a board to be called, which would have community engagement and media and communications as a key element. What you had, unfortunately, with the Nicola Bully investigation was the poor investigation officer who had a great deal of work to do with a search strategy.
Yeah, and this is Rebecca that they're talking about there. And I do, ever since I read the College of Policing report, I've had a lot more sympathy with Rebecca to know that she was just left to do the press conference. At the same time, she's trying to do her own work. No wonder she was so defensive. She was obviously she didn't want to do that conference. She didn't think it was her. It was right for her to do it. She felt that it should have been someone higher up. The chief constable, who has retired now or will be at the end of March, I think the buck lies with him. I think he has been pushed. He dealt with it terribly. He couldn't be bothered. That's how it feels, isn't it? It feels like maybe because he was coming near to retirement, he just thought, I can't be asked with this. Who knows? But he left everybody else to do it for him. Poor Peter Lawson died of stress probably after it all. Rebecca is retired now anyway, but you could see that she was just not happy bunny at all during that press conference that she did with Peter. And like this lady is saying this, she's an ex-chief constable, she knows, and she's saying that the chief constable should have dealt with it.
With all the things involved around the investigation, they had to do all the communication as well. This is not just an issue for Lancashire Police. This is a critical issue for policing in general, because they didn't grasp the narrative from a very, very early stage. It allowed yourselves, the media, to fill the void, and more importantly, it allowed social media to fill the void, and Lancashire never got that back.
But the things that you are talking about are no small failures, are they? Lack of support for the family, the information vacuum into which speculation emerges.
Yeah, and there was the thing about the family liaison officers were not trained properly and things like that. They didn't support the family properly. And maybe, that's why Paul, whatever you think of Paul or don't think of him, he was sort of left like a bit of a loose cannon as well to say things. And it was dealt with terribly. You can see this woman, you know, she knows, and she's saying it in no uncertain terms. Information vacuums, not looking after the family. Do you think it was with the because I felt with the Lancashire police, looking at some of the, because I watched a couple of videos like about, you know, from before the Nicola Bulley case that they put out on their social media pages, you know, on their Facebook, etc. At the Christmas, there was Sally Riley talking, and I don't think they'd ever dealt with anything like this. So I think it just totally, you know, looking at they've never maybe dealt with anything of this magnitude. I mean, they deal with a lot of crime, obviously, in that, but nothing like this. This sort of, and the international attention that it got. Do you think it just totally took them by surprise?
Was this then, in your view, a consequence of a lack of leadership at Lancashire Police?
I think they just didn't realise how big this story was going to be. But the reality of the situation is, once the Chief Constable saw that the media interest was not dying down, the Chief Constable should have stepped in with their senior team. And that didn't happen. And therefore, the Chief Constable should carry the weight of that decision.
I mean, let's be clear here. This was not the Metropolitan Police. This wasn't Greater Manchester Police. Was this potentially a matter of a smaller force being thrust into the spotlight in this manner by the level of interest, not just, of course, from the media, but from social media as well?
I'm afraid the issue is police officers, and chief officers in particular, still, no matter how many of these large incidents we have, they still do not grasp the importance of social media, the importance of communication with the media, the importance of communication with the communities. I remember back in 1988, Lockerbie incident, I remember as a very young police.
Oh, this is very interesting because she goes back to 1988 and Lockerbie, which of course was when the aeroplane exploded and landed on the little village of Lockerbie. Oh, and also I just want to say hello, Monica. Hi, Monica. And what she said there as well, wasn't it, that the Chief Constable should have stepped in when it looked like, you know, when it was going crazy, really, wasn't it? Early on, really, the Chief Constable should have stepped in. So now she's going to tell us about what happened in 1988 with Lockerbie.
Officer listening to the most compelling discussion that I've ever heard in policing. And it was from the father who lost his daughter, actually, in Lockerbie. And he said he had no criticism of the investigation itself, but he was highly critical of the communication. What policing has to remember is that there is more than the victim when you are undertaking an investigation, particularly.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because I quite often say that there is more than the victim. You know, where you take any murder case or missing person case or, you know, self-deletion, it's not only that person that, you know, obviously they're at the crux of it, the hub of it, but the ripples go out to family, friends, you know, even to you know, the responders and that, like when we were talking about the fires earlier today, people that end up finding the bodies and things like that, or the effects that it has go out. But the most important thing, of course, the most important ripples are to the family. They have to be looked after because they're trying to deal with something that nobody should ever have to deal with, and nobody knows how to deal with.
Particularly one of this size. And what you need to do is you need to have strategies around communication around media management and support, and around community engagement are equally as critical as the investigation and the search strategies in this particular incident. Police officers still have their heads very stuck in the sand that their only role is to do the investigation. They don't understand the social science around actually having a multifaceted investigation approach.
Because, of course, and I remember this because we covered it on the podcast at the time, you had people descending on this part of the world to the crime scene, in fact. How do you, though, manage a situation in which...
He just said crime scene again. They're always calling it a crime scene. You had people descending to the crime scene. Let's listen to that again. It's very interesting the way these journalists always refer, well, even the police at the College of Policing report, when at the press conference, they referred to it as a crime scene.
Understand the social science around actually having a multifaceted investigation approach.
Because, of course, and I remember this because we covered it on the podcast at the time, you had people descending on this part of the world to the crime scene.
Yeah, people descending on this part of the world to the crime scene. That is not the first time. In fact, it's one of many times that people have referred to it as a crime scene. And then do you remember when I showed you that video of one, the guy, I think that was on GB News or Talk TV, one of those, referring to it, the terrible murder of Nicola Bulley. You know, it makes you wonder, you know, do they know more than we do? Is it accepted that maybe there was more to it, but it's just that it can't be proved? So, you know, they're not going any further. I don't know, but crime scene, there you go. It's always referred to as the crime scene. But it wasn't a crime scene. It was an accident, apparently. Strange, isn't it?
In fact, how do you, though, manage a situation in which the internet descends on a town to conduct its own investigations?
You will always get people looking to social media for the conspiracy theories and everything else. But if the mainstream media is fully briefed into the operations, then what you have is people have the opportunity to actually read what is really going on. I had an absolutely superb media and communications manager who worked with me. She was a director of communications, and she was highly complimented by the media after the Moat incident concluded, because she kept everybody briefed. And believe me, it's quite difficult to be told as a chief constable when you are naturally reserved in relation to dealing with the press, that you have to go and sit in front of them every day. You have to conduct briefings with them. You have to be spending the majority of your time as the chief with briefing the communities and the media. But that is the way that 21st century policing needs to manage critical incidents.
Sue, thank you. And that's your lot for this edition of the Sky News Daily.
Well, I think Sue was very interesting. She gave us a very good insight there. You just wish, you know, somebody decent would have been in charge of Nicola's case. Maybe there'd be a different outcome. There'd be, you know, it was just a total... quite often I just think everyone let Nicola down. You know, just... very sad, very sad. But another interesting thing, of course, that came out of that was Martin Brunt. Martin Brunt saying that he was the one that introduced SGI to the family, where we'd always been told that it was Nicola. Oh, hi, Rainbow Raven. Thank you so much for becoming a member. Thank you. It's just popped up on my screen. Sorry, that's my fault. I didn't see it before, but thank you for that. Thank you for becoming a member. Yeah, that's a bit of a... So where's the truth then? So we've heard that it was Paul who contacted Peter Faulding. It was Emma that contacted Peter Faulding. Now it turns out it was Martin Brunt that recommended Peter Faulding. You know, I've never heard that before, ever. That's the first time. And, you know, I know a lot about the Nicola Bulley case. I've been watching everything, following everything. And that's the first time I've ever heard that it was Martin Brunt who contacted us, who recommended SGI. So I thought that, I hope I thought that podcast was very, very interesting. We got a lot of insights from that. I mean, it doesn't, I don't know where things are going to go with Nicola Bulley. It may go nowhere. That could be the end of it, the end of investigations. At the end of the day, we've had the inquest, the verdict was given, the family's happy with it, even if nobody else is, but the family are, and that's the most important thing, I suppose. So it's difficult to know where you can take it after. An interesting podcast, I think. So I'm glad I found that. I'm always looking out for anything, that we've not seen about Nicola Bulley, etc. So, as you know, if I find anything, and I'm still doing this docu-series, I want to do like a series, and it's just all in my head. It's just a question of time, really, sorting